So our next speaker is Kate Adin, and Kate works at Royal Rehab, and Kate graduated as a Bachelor of Social Studies at the University of Sydney, but we really won't hold that against her, okay? Some of us much prefer the people who come from the University of New South Wales, just putting it out there, yes, okay? There is this hierarchy, there is, okay? Upon graduating, she worked in the health system and child protection in London. Upon returning to Sydney, she worked in the field of adoption, palliative care and the New South Wales trustee and guardian before moving to Royal Rehabilitation Services 5 years ago. She works with the community-based rehab team, which covers the public outpatient department, the home-based program and the transitional package. In this context, she has worked extensively with people that have experienced a stroke. So thank you, Kate.
Really good introduction, thank you. And we get to see, or I get to see people after they've come home from hospital, usually within the first week. So I guess that's kind of important. Anyway, so we get to see people when they're home, and it is when, in a way, reality hits about what does this mean? What does having a stroke mean when they talk to you about, some loss in memory, or the person needs to be assisted when mobilising for everyone. The introductory thing is that we are a general service for rehab, and we visit people in their home, so that's the focus. By general, I mean not specifically stroke or any other health issue, but all the issues that can come up for people, including having cancer, having a heart attack, having a fall and a fracture, and neurological diseases. The big thing is that by and large they need to be in hospital when the referral is made, and that there's been a fairly large change in their health and well-being and independence. So the first program that we've got is the home-based rehab program, and sorry, just our catchment area for all of our rehab is the Northern Sydney Local Health District only. So the home-based rehab program is basically for people over 18, and it's 6 weeks unless a person has a stroke, and then it can go up to 9 weeks. We're a multidisciplinary team: social work, physio, occupational therapy, dietetics, speech, horticultural services and recreational services. The referral is always from hospital while people are still an inpatient, and so that's that. I'm also part of the public outpatient department at Royal Rehab, and the referrals for that can come from hospital, but people don't usually, they're folk that are living at home and do not need a home-based rehab program generally. So they're much more independent, and they need to attend our outpatient department. Folk need to be under 65 to be referred, or if they're still working and over 65. Again, varying health conditions, and how long they attend really is determined in 12-week slots. So we have a goal review at the end of each 12 weeks. We go, okay, what do you want to work on next? And so forth. So people vary in terms of their attendance from up to a year to 12 weeks. The Transitional Care Package, has anybody heard of that? Again, comes from hospital, and it is specifically for people over the age of 65. It requires an aged care assessment, again, the person needs to be in a hospital setting before the referral is made. And the Transpac consists of a home-based rehab part and like a home care package part, so that families get care support like cleaning, shopping, personal care, etc. And because people are over 65 and overall in their 80s, the thinking is that there's a longer recovery time, really, that's needed. Okay, so let's have a look at the next. So all of it is actually one team that just moves through these different programs, the same team, multidisciplinary team. Referrals come from my colleagues. They come from the original source of referral where social work's identified. They come from the case manager of the Transpac, the client themselves, but for people that have had a stroke, there's an automatic referral because of the potential changes to life and to everyone. Just to say that we did a little bit of a count of the last 12 months, and we found in outpatients and the home-based program, 30% of people have had a stroke in the last 12 months of our clients, and 40% of them have got under 65. So that's quite a new trend for us. So the context, it's important to know when we see people because that determines what we do and what support they have. So it's that coming home when reality hits about what effect whatever health condition has had on folk. And I just wanted to say that we use the idea of loss and grief theory quite a lot to make sense of what people are going through. And the idea of, the way I kind of understand it is that, loss and grief is about letting go of something you can no longer have and turning towards something that you can have. But it's a long process, way beyond how long we see people. So social work basically has two aspects to it. The first is supportive counselling, as my colleague had mentioned. And a lot of that is, again, acknowledging that life has changed, whether a lot or little, and for the moment, and that there is a time of uncertainty for everybody, where you're not sure, how well will I get, and what does that mean? So it is really living in that chaos of going in one direction and somebody pulls the rug from under you and now you've got to get up and kind of keep going and you don't know. So that's an important factor, and the approach that we tend to use with that is, talking about acknowledging what's happened, acknowledging, yes, life is chaotic at the moment, or different, then looking at, people have lived a long time and they've developed ways of dealing with, with challenges in life, and acknowledging those and highlighting them to say, okay, this is what helped you the last time when you lost your parent or when you lived in a time that was uncertain. And then we talk about, what can we add to that? Is there anything additional that would be helpful at the moment? As my colleague has said, the work is with the client and with really important people in their life. and usually that often is the family members and the spouse. And as to how much of that is with the person and how much is it with the family member really depends on the situation, and partly depends on whether the person's had a lot of changes around their memory, and then the focus is more on the family member because they need support to implement things like rehab. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you. And a part of grief is the feelings that arise is anxiety and stress and being overwhelmed and losing hope, which is really what depression is as well. And again, acknowledging that, but also saying that people move from one to the other. They move in and out of hope. And I think often the point at which my colleagues would refer is when someone's like, I'm too anxious to get up and try walking, and I don't want to participate in rehab because it's too hard and it's not going to make a lot of difference. And I want to... So it's validating that, as you've said. The other thing is that we're getting a lot braver and acknowledging that there are changes post-stroke to perhaps neurologically to people, and the intimacy part of the marriage can be affected, and it's opening that conversation and acknowledging it. The other part of the social work role is a very practical one that you've already stated, and the My Aged Care, and we all know that at the moment they're really short-staffed, so the services are limited. Sorry? No? Okay. But providing information, access and linkage to, say, to My Aged Care, talking about the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and often that is deferred to when the person comes home. And that is really tricky, not just from a hope point of view, but because of the criteria for NDIS, which is you don't qualify unless somebody says this is permanent and therapy is not going to make a big difference to it. So, and in reality, people improve. So that's the tricky thing with it. But on the other hand, if you're under 65, where do you get support? So those are some of the dilemmas. And finances, yes, as has already been mentioned, talking about that for the first time. Stroke specific, the Stroke Recovery Association, men in particular love Enable, I found, and they get on there and listen to the TED Talks. And I remember one gentleman we're working with at the moment was really interested in that, in his fear of this can happen again, particularly since he didn't have the usual pre-existing health issues that people sometimes have. And it's that sense of what can I do? So he found that talk really useful. Peer support. Now, sometimes people are not quite ready in those few weeks of coming home to actually link up with a stroke club or even to go online. But what they find really helpful is talking to someone who's ahead of their stroke journey. So we've got, they're not here, but a couple, Bill and his wife, Sue, I've forgotten her name. Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Yes, Gooley. They actually meet with couples often, and they talk about, this is the effect it had on me as the spouse, this is what I needed to do, these are my extra responsibilities, versus this is what happened to me. And Bill would say, it took me 12 months to realise I actually can't go back to work. So it's a long process, and find it really useful. And at the moment, I'm trying to do a little bit, even people that are not quite that far down the track, but people that I'm working with in outpatients, and like linking a man who has just started going back to work 2.5 days a week with somebody further down the track who's actually negotiated to work part-time, and how he did that and how that's working for him, and, you know, working on how do you say no to a really big workload. And then I linked the middleman with somebody who's a new stroke, who's just looking at, really focused on getting back to work, but still hasn't nailed things like, well, you can't drive, you're really tired, and you need to use public transport. So it's sort of, and it's working really well. Counselling ongoing is really hard, actually, because it costs. Unless you've got, for family members, you've got the Carer Gateway that provides some free counselling, but also a great information kind of source as well for when people are more ready, you know, when the emergency is a bit more contained and they've got a bit of space to think about the future. Brilliant, brilliant services. And I'm just mentioning, thank you, mentioning specific stuff for people if they've got multiple sclerosis, linking them to that society and peer groups. And the last thing is just, a lot of the time it's ongoing, sort of, we all do, if you like, education, because in the hospital setting, you get a lot of information given around, you know, all of a sudden the person's more impulsive, or they actually need supervision when they're walking. What that means when you're home is the bit about, and reminding, like, well, that's the effect of the stroke. That's what that means. So what can we do with that? What can we do so that you've got a bit of time, etc. So, and I guess the very last thing is, so remembering our role is for a brief period of time when people come home and the reality of the effects of the health condition becomes apparent in the home situation. It's a journey that takes many years for people. So our aim is to at least make sure, if we can, that they're not isolated, that they're linked, and that they know who to go to when they need that. Thank you.